Have you ever heard someone say, "I have to turn the other cheek," as a synonym for being a doormat? What if I told you that this might be one of the most misunderstood commands in the entire Bible, and that getting it wrong has kept Christians from experiencing its revolutionary power? In the next few minutes, we're going to unpack what Jesus really meant, and you'll discover this isn't about passive submission. It's about a brilliant form of nonviolent resistance that would change history. To truly understand this radical statement, we need to travel back to first-century Palestine under Roman occupation. This wasn't just a different time. It was a different world with completely different social codes. Honor and shame were the currency of society. A slap to the face, particularly with the back of the right hand, wasn't merely physical violence. It was a calculated insult, a public declaration that you were socially inferior, unworthy of even being treated as an equal. The dynamics of power were starkly visible every day. Roman soldiers could legally force Jewish citizens to carry their equipment for 1 mile, a humiliating reminder of their subjugation. Masters could strike slaves without consequence. The oppressed lived in a system designed to keep them in their place. And it's precisely into this context of systemic oppression that Jesus speaks these shocking words. "You have heard that it was said, 'Eye for eye and tooth for tooth.' But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also." Let's examine this text more closely. Jesus begins by referencing one of the oldest legal principles in human history, the lex talionis, an eye for an eye. Most people misunderstand this ancient law as promoting vengeance, but in reality, it was designed to limit retaliation. In a world where one insult could lead to a generational blood feud, eye for an eye meant the punishment must fit the crime, no more. But Jesus takes this much further. Now here's what most people miss about the right cheek. In Jesus' world, people generally struck with the right hand. To slap someone's right cheek with your right hand, you typically use the back of your hand, the insulting blow reserved for social inferiors. But if the victim then turns the left cheek, the aggressor faces a problem. To strike that cheek, he'd either have to use the back of his right hand again, awkward and less forceful, or use his left hand, which was considered unclean for such actions. Either way, the power dynamic has shifted. This is why scholars like Walter Wink call this Jesus' third way, neither violent resistance nor passive submission. By turning the other cheek, the victim is saying, "I refuse to play the inferior in this relationship. Hit me as an equal, or don't hit me at all." It's a brilliant non-violent protest that exposes the injustice of the system while maintaining the victim's dignity. But there's even more depth here. When Jesus says, "Do not resist the evil person," the Greek word for resist is antistena, a military term meaning to oppose in battle. Jesus isn't telling us to be passive. He's telling us not to meet evil on its own terms, not to become what we oppose. C.S. Lewis captured this beautifully when he wrote, "Christian forgiveness is not a feeling, it is an act of the will." Turning the other cheek isn't about feeling warm and fuzzy toward your oppressor. It's a conscious, willful decision to break the cycle of violence and retaliation. It's choosing a different kind of power, the power that ultimately overcame the world through a cross. This understanding transforms how we apply this teaching today. Let me give you 3 practical examples. First, in the workplace. When a superior publicly humiliates you in a meeting, turning the other cheek doesn't mean silently absorbing the abuse. It might mean responding calmly. "I value your feedback, but I believe we can address this with mutual respect." This refuses the role of victim while not escalating the conflict. Second, in our digital age, when someone slanders you online and you have all the evidence to destroy their reputation, turning the other cheek means speaking the truth without malice, refusing to become what you're confronting. This is exponentially harder than retaliating, but it breaks the cycle of digital violence. Third, in personal relationships. When family members push your buttons with the same patterns year after year, turning the other cheek might mean setting healthy boundaries without returning the emotional violence. Now I know what some of you are thinking. What about defending the innocent? What if someone is attacking my family? This is crucial. Jesus is specifically addressing personal insults and offenses against you. The Bible elsewhere affirms the responsibility to protect the vulnerable. Defending others isn't personal retaliation, it's love in action. The prohibition is against the spirit of resentment and vengeance that so easily consumes us. So let me ask you directly, where does this challenge you right now? Is it that coworker who constantly undermines you? The family member who knows exactly how to push your buttons? The online troll who seems determined to provoke you? What would it look like to turn the other cheek in that situation? Not as a weak victim, but as someone so secure in their identity that they refuse to be defined by the insult. I'll be honest, this isn't natural. Our every instinct screams for retaliation, for proving ourselves, for making sure they don't get away with it. That's why this teaching is impossible to live out without understanding what comes next in the passage. Because Jesus continues, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. He's not just giving us a new rule, he's inviting us into a new reality, a new way of being human that he himself embodied. And this brings us to the most important point. Jesus didn't just teach this, he lived it perfectly. On the cross, surrounded by mocking soldiers, betrayed by friends, subjected to the ultimate humiliation, he prayed, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." He turned the other cheek not just metaphorically but literally, offering not just his face but his hands, his feet, his whole being. And in that moment, what looked like ultimate defeat became the greatest victory in human history. This is the scandalous truth. The cross was God turning the other cheek to humanity. It was divine, non-violent resistance to evil itself. And because Jesus did this first, we're not called to imitate him in our own strength. We're invited to participate in what he's already accomplished. So let's recap. Turning the other cheek isn't passive weakness. It's active resistance that breaks cycles of violence while maintaining human dignity. It's refusing to let your enemy define who you are. It's the revolutionary way of Jesus that transforms relationships, communities, and even enemies. Now I want to hear from you. What's one relationship or situation where you feel challenged to apply this teaching? Be specific in the comments. I need to turn the other cheek when my person/situation. Let's learn from each other's journeys. If this deep dive into Jesus' teaching has given you a fresh perspective on what it means to follow him, hit that like button and subscribe for more. In our next video, we'll tackle an even more challenging command. Love your enemies, and discover how the impossible becomes revolutionary when we understand what Jesus really meant. Until then, remember, the way of the cross looks like weakness to the world, but it's the only power that can truly change it.